The American economy, how much the president's role is playing in this, and the things you don't know that he's doing. We get a visit from one of his senior advisors. Welcome to the Mike Broomhead Show.
Well, I got a message, I got a song. Can I get a witness? Tell me what's going on. I show the people I've been away.
You know, we have a lot to be proud of in the state of Arizona. Robert Graham was the former Republican Party chairman here in the state of Arizona, but he is going to join us for an interview as now a senior advisor to Donald Trump. We start the show off with something we call the sweep. Now, the sweep is sponsored by my good friends at Zero Res Carpet and Tile Cleaning. Let's start off by talking about the headlines of the week with the president. President Trump and North Korea. We know what happened going back to the Tomahawk missile launches in Syria. Then there was the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan, which sent a serious message to our enemies saying that we are willing and able to respond to anything. Well, now the North Koreans, we've got their attention. So President Trump sent Vice President Pence into the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, and then in Japan, giving a speech about North Korea to the troops, reassuring them about our stance on things. Listen to the first thing Vice President Pence says about what we will do with our enemies.
The United States of America will always seek peace, but under President Trump, the shield stands guard and the sword stands ready. And those who would challenge our resolve or our readiness should know we will defeat any attack and meet any use of conventional or nuclear weapons with an overwhelming and effective American response.
You know, at some point, you have to stop talking about the previous administration. But in this case, there is something to note. The previous administration downsized the military. There were a lot of military service members and especially officers that were losing their field commands as we shrunk the size of our military. So Vice President Pence taking this opportunity while addressing the troops to talk about the stance taken by this administration and by this current president. Watch this.
And I have to tell you, as the parent of someone in the service, it is the greatest privilege of my life to serve as vice president to a president who is so dedicated to the men and women of our armed forces, their families, and our veterans. I can tell you from my heart, President Donald Trump will be the best friend America's armed forces will ever have.
Now, that was pretty incredible. Let's jump forward to some Arizona news. There are some things that are happening here in the state of Arizona you need to know. The City of Phoenix Police Department. We got to talk about something that's gotten me outraged. The Phoenix City Council passed a piece of legislation, or a policy change, actually, to the Phoenix Police Department about how they will deal with people when they come in contact with them, whether they are reporting or victims of crimes, and not asking them their immigration status. Let me tell you what the problem is. The mayor of Phoenix' name is Greg Stanton. I've talked before about this adversarial relationship I've got with the mayor. Tried to get him on the show many times. He won't come and talk with us. I had a lot of respect for Greg Stanton, but Greg Stanton is going to be running for governor in about 6 years. I can almost guarantee that outside of some big anomaly happening. Now this is a political maneuver. President Trump is talking about deporting illegal immigrants. The city of Phoenix said right away, and Greg Stanton, one of the big focal points of this, saying that we're not going along with this. He was one of the outspoken people that said candidate Trump was not welcome in Arizona. He doesn't speak for every Phoenician. He's the mayor of Phoenix and represents all of us. Donald Trump is the president. So they pass a piece of policy change that says the Phoenix police will not do this. They won't do this with people they come in contact with. Guess what? They weren't in the first place. The chief of police, Jerry Williams, does a phenomenal job. Chief Williams has been doing a great job there. The City of Phoenix Police Department has a great relationship with people in the community. They fostered that over years and years and years before Greg Stanton was mayor. So a piece of political legislation saying that the city council is going to protect the citizens from the police is a bad message to send. Next in Arizona news, Kyrsten Sinema, who is a representative in our United States House of Representatives, made what I think is her first mistake. Now, she is a Democrat. We disagree on a lot of issues, but her and I work together on a lot of veterans issues as well. And she is a good to the veterans, and she's a good person. But man, did she make a mistake. Backpage.com is a website where the owners are on trial right now. They owned the Phoenix New Times. They had donated up to about $30,000, them and their families, to Kyrsten Sinema's campaigns. She just now donated that money. The problem is she should have done that a long time ago because it just looks bad. And for her to say that she didn't realize that those people were associated with Backpage doesn't make sense. She knew them when they owned the New Times. Lastly, the VA Choice Card, the pilot program, TriWest and CVS here in the Valley, where we take the show from, 24 locations where veterans can go and get care. It is fantastic. Good to see this, hoping this pilot program rolls out nationwide as veterans now have other choices than having to go to the VA for simple medical conditions. Coming up in a few moments, Robert Graham, former GOP chairman in the state of Arizona, joins the show. He is a trade advisor to the Trump presidency and was one of the senior advisors to the campaign. We'll talk trade, we will talk jobs, we'll even talk NAFTA. We'll do that in just a few moments. But before we do, let me talk about the people at Zerorez. Zerorez has got a product called Empowered Water. So when they clean your carpets, they don't use soaps or chemicals. That's where they get their name. They're the only company in the industry that can do this without leaving any residue. They're the only ones that claim to leave no residue in your carpet because it's only water. Cleans as effectively as cleaners. Your carpets dry faster. They stay cleaner longer. Do yourself a favor. Get on their schedule. Zerorez does a fantastic job all the way around. Find their website, ZerorezPhoenix.com. Call to get on their schedule. We'll be back in a moment with Robert Graham. Stick around. One of my favorite guests to have on, talking about the state of Arizona, politically speaking, a former chairman of the Arizona Republican Party, but also a senior advisor to the Trump campaign, is Robert Graham, and I appreciate you doing this again.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Want to get an update. A lot going on in D.C. From the Trump campaign internationally. We've been hearing about Syria and everything that's happened on the combat front, or at least militarily. But there's a lot going on with trade deals that he's trying to benefit the American people. Right. Can you kind of update us on where we are? We keep hearing about tax reform stalling, but it's not just dealing with that in the economy.
No, he's like the Energizer Bunny, so he's never stopped moving. So a lot of things that he made as promises during the campaign, he's grabbing it with both hands and he's making it happen. As it relates to trade deals, this whole Buy American, Hire American, this last bill that
right.
kind of worked itself through, that bill is something that everybody's been talking about for years and years in our country. We'd always say Americans buy American, but that doesn't do much for your economy. So his whole mantra behind that is getting the rest of the world to buy American goods and services, and then that'll put more Americans to work. So it's smart. It's how you grow an economy, is by getting other people to come into it, and the tax plan is part of that. Make it attractive for foreign direct investment and consumption.
So when you look at what he's done with the visa program to try to encourage companies to hire Americans first, how does that play out 2, 3, 4 years down the road? You got kids going into college now. What's the prospects for them in a couple of years?
Well, what you'll see the migration of like expertise. So you'll see people as far as with their bachelors. Where's the opportunity? So when the market starts to show, whether it's in technology, whether it's in healthcare, wherever it's going to find, that's where we're going to see the migration of students. The idea is to push hard, make sure that our local people are hiring local people for the right type of wages and be competitive, but be competitive nationally or internationally. And so you'll see a migration. It's hard to say right now. Technology's back. I mean, he's promoting innovation again. I mean, he's starting to do a lot of things that are encouraging people to take risk and also get rewarded for the risk.
So when you look at those visas, the students on other parts of the world that would be experts in a field that would come here, is it going to water down the quality of the competition because we're excluding some people from other countries and trying to be America first?
Yeah, I think he's going to be. I mean, I think when you look at the visa reform, when it's actually really done, you're going to see some modifications in there that are going to be smart and thoughtful. I mean, everything he's done, we talked about that earlier, is very intentional in what he does, and so he's going to be smart. What he's going to do, if you look at a lot of these people that are migrating into our country for these high-tech jobs and such, they've never worked before. They have great educations, but they've never worked before, and that's part of the reason why they pay them lower wages, because they have no practical experience. So when the demand increases, you need real practical experience, and so that's what we're trying to do with the U.S. education and the systems and the processes to get our people out in front.
I know you spent a lot of time in Mexico, and if you watch some cable news networks, you would think that we're almost at war with Mexico, especially with the building of the wall and some other things that have happened, some other, not even arguments, but just what we're hearing in the media. What is the relationship between the two countries like as far as trade goes, but also just the relationships between the two countries?
Yeah, if you look, we heard a lot about the trade deficit that the U.S. has with Mexico, about $58 billion or $68 billion, depending on the math that you're using. Right now, you've got 120 million people down there consuming, and they're consuming a boatload of energy. So on the administration sides, the president of Mexico, Peña Nieto, and his team are open, willing to make deals, and the same thing is happening at the White House. They've both taken kind of a nationalistic position to protect our countries, but that's appropriate in every sense of the word. But we have 14 million people in the U.S. that are employed as a result of NAFTA. NAFTA is old, it's stale, it needs to be refreshed. And there are covenants within that agreement that will allow for it to be refreshed. And so the Trump team is actually looking into that, and they're looking at covenants that are in NAFTA to help them revise and replace or just renew NAFTA.
So the impression that people get, though, is that the president wants to get rid of NAFTA. Does he want to just get rid of it, or does he want to update it and make sure that it's beneficial? Because what I thought was interesting was that when he talked about NAFTA originally, leaders in Canada and in Mexico both said, we'll come to the table and talk about NAFTA. It seems like everybody wants to fix it or update it.
There's so much in it that can be updated. There's a thing called a Jamboree Clause where they get back together. Hasn't happened since 1996, and that's where they can refresh and make it current. So I sent a white paper over, kind of pointed out some covenants, and my response from Bannon was, we're going to give this to the NAFTA chieftain, and then we'll respond with comments a little bit over my head. So they're giving it to the best people that have real trade experience, and then they're going to come to the table. But the idea is to benefit our country.
Can you give us an example or two, or is there anything like that you're allowed to talk about? You can give us an example of some of the things that you believe will improve NAFTA for everybody.
Oh yeah, so like you look at tariff harmonization, right? So right now tariffs are unbalanced with different countries coming in and doing trade. Well, in a North American trade agreement, if you have Mexico, the US, and Canada treating other countries that are coming in and doing trade exactly with the same tariffs, then what happens, it keeps people like China and other countries from coming in and dumping. You heard today in the news, Trump was talking about steel, U.S. steel. Well, when steel comes in and they dump it at very low prices, it makes it very difficult for U.S. to have any kind of foothold as it relates to competition. So when they do this tariff harmonization, just as one example, it'll actually flatten it out, and it puts up nice blocks against countries like China from going into Mexico and taking over and wrecking it like they have in Africa and other countries like that.
So that's just one example of what we've done with NAFTA. So I want to talk to you about some other parts of the world, what's going on. We're going to take a quick break. Robert Graham is with us. He was the former GOP chairman in the state of Arizona. He has also been a senior advisor to the Trump campaign and obviously a lot to do with trade. So we'll be back in a moment. All right, we're back with Robert Graham, who was a GOP chairman, a Republican Party chairman here in Arizona, and also a senior advisor to Donald Trump during the campaign. And in your expertise, let's go back to your time as chairman of the party in Arizona. There is this picture in Washington, D.C., at least through the media portrayal, that the Republican Party is fractured. And we look at the health care reform bill that went through and how they were not able to pass it through the House because they couldn't get enough people in on it. Right. Do you believe that there is a fracturing of the party, or do you think that this is more of a media wish list that they're hoping that there's more fracturing in the party?
It's a media wish list. They're gonna stoke it and make it seem like there's this great big wedge. The wedge doesn't exist to the same degree that they're suggesting. There is a wedge. I mean, when you have the Freedom Caucus taking the stand that they're taking, you have the Ryan's team doing that, and you have the White House, you have different perspectives on what they're hopeful. Like when you talk about the health care bill, the likelihood of that bill going through the second time is very high at this particular point. When you have the House, the Senate, and you got the president pushing it, they're going to whip and they're going to do everything they possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of leverage that can come from the White House, and I think that's a learned skill. And we have a political neophyte in every sense of the word, which is why one of the reasons why we liked the guy is because we want him not to have all that political baggage. But now he's starting to understand really the leverage that the presidency has. And I would suggest that healthcare is going to go through pretty quickly. I don't think we're going to have the same disruption as it relates to tax changes and the tax reform that's happening, and then the infrastructure stuff too.
Well, you're a businessman also, and obviously an expert in trade and some other things. When it comes to the taxation for businesses, is there any possibility that this Congress and this president can get a flat tax done? There's almost 75,000 pages in the tax code. How do we get a reduced tax code and something simple for everyone?
So the hardest thing about the tax code, flat tax is magical, right? We understand the value. There's every research. We've seen all these other countries that have adopted it, have done fantastic. It's such a vast departure from the IRS and this 75,000 page tax code, what happens is people get uncomfortable with those kind of radical shifts or changes. The idea that IRS could go away makes people, even though they may hate the IRS, it makes people uncomfortable. So when you have the Congress and Senate dealing with their constituents, it becomes a whole different beast. So that's why these incremental changes or these tax reforms, to get people used to it, and then when they see the benefit of reducing taxes that attracts foreign direct investment, increases consumption, then quality of life increases and so on, that's when you start to get believers, and that's when you start to introduce this whole notion of campaigning for policy. And that's ultimately where they have to go after they get through the rest of the confirmations and after they get a couple of these big ones out of the way.
So a personal, from your perspective, 'cause I know you know the president fairly well, he would be portrayed in the media as, like you said, he is a novice when it comes to politics, but almost as if he's in over his head. They made a big deal about this armada moving into the Korean Peninsula, almost as if he made this huge mistake. From your perspective, what is his acumen for the job that he's doing now, and how do you think he's been performing so far?
So that's a great question. When I look at President Trump, when I met him as candidate Trump, the one thing that I noticed and what was remarkable is how well he listened to everything. If he had a very good question, he would listen and really wait for an answer. And he assessed it and he made his decision. Look what he's doing. I mean, you've got a runaway ship here in the United States, right? As far as Obama left us with an incredible amount of debt, spending that was completely out of control. But then you start to see the discipline behind what he's doing. Hiring freezes, pay freezes. You saw what he did with the GAO right now, where the access and hiring, he wants every record to see if there was some nepotism and stuff. So he's starting to constrict the government in the sense what a disciplined CEO would do if they're coming into a failing company. So what he's doing there, and that's not going to make people feel good. That's going to disrupt the whole apple cart because people don't know if they're going to have a job tomorrow. So now you have all these people that don't know, and they're part of that bureaucratic mess, and they're going to make noise. And that's exactly what you're seeing. So when you see this shift, I think he's actually executing remarkable discipline. We also have 66 executive orders. You've seen some things turn around. The regulation freezes. He's trying to turn back the stuff that's happening with the EPA. All of this is business friendly and quality of life friendly for citizens of the U.S. And so seeing this, the media is not going to want to report on some of that stuff because it's not sexy, it's not that leading or bleeding story, but it's something that's going to have real impact over time.
I was impressed with the fact that he seems like he's listening to his advisors on foreign policy. The domestic issues, like you said, there's a little bit of the negotiating power where you're not the dictator as much as you are as a CEO, but now there's more negotiating. With that negotiating skill now that he's starting to get, do you think we're going to get healthcare reform and tax reform done this year?
I think so. I think but he's going to be disciplined in a sense. If it's not exactly what he wants, he's going to pull back from it because he can. And that's the one thing that American people have to recognize. It's we're a immediate gratification country. If it doesn't happen right away, okay, that's bad. Well, it's wrong. If they put a bad piece of legislation through, we have bad outcomes. And so he's got the discipline to recognize that we're going to put the right stuff through. And I think ultimately that's what he's trying to do.
I always appreciate your expertise. It's funny to watch the kind of the rise of what you've been doing nationally. I wish more people in Arizona knew the effect you're having on the national scene with the travels you're doing and with the advice you're giving. And we wish you a lot of success. And I hope you'll keep coming back to inform us as we go ahead. Robert Graham, thanks for coming.
Mike. Yep.
We'll be back. Welcome back. It's time for one of my favorite parts of the show. We call it From Arizona for America. It's our way to congratulate and thank the fine Arizona men and women who have recently graduated from boot camp and are now serving in our country's military. So please join me in honoring Airman Christian Murillo from Cortez High School in Phoenix, Airman Jeremiah Tumbleson from Benjamin Franklin High School in Queen Creek, and Airman First Class Cole Heupel from Boulder Creek High School in Anthem. For a list of more of our friends and neighbors that are from Arizona for America, you can go to the Mike Broomhead page at aztv.com. We'll be back in a minute with Broomhead's Best and #this. Don't go away. Time for my favorite part of the show. It's called Broomhead's Best. Phoenix Rising. Now, Phoenix Rising is the soccer club. They are Division II right now, but they are one of 12 cities. Phoenix is one of 12 cities vying for an MLS expansion franchise. They went a long way. The man's name is Didier Drogba, one of the top 30 all-time players ever in the game of soccer, is coming here to play for the Phoenix Rising. This week, you are Broomhead's Best. Now it's something we call #this. It's #Gronk. Gronkowski at the White House really, what would you say? He interrupts Sean Spicer. Watch this.
Can I just? I think I got this, but thank you. Maybe. All right, thanks, man. I'll see you in a minute. Hold on.
There it is. Gronkowski at the White House, there to meet the president and accept the accolades for winning Super Bowl champions. We'll be back to close out the show. Don't go away. You know, before we close out the show this week, I want to touch on something that we've been watching a trend. It seems as if people that dislike this president want to make him out to be the dumbest man that's ever lived. Why is it we can't disagree with political opponents without insulting their character or insulting their intelligence? The fact that Donald Trump made a statement about an armada of ships heading to South Korea before they had left the port doesn't make him a horrible president or a stupid person. So the people that love Donald Trump will defend him a lot of times at all cost, but the people that dislike him are trying to find reasons to make him out to be a stupid man. The fact of the matter is the American people elected him president. Do you believe in the Constitution? Do you believe in our laws and the way we do things? If so, live with it and elect somebody else in 4 years. And let's debate what our differences are. But why can't we do it without insulting each other's character? I can call you wrong without calling you stupid. Then you could do the same for me. We'll go a lot further to clear things up. We'll be back next Saturday with the show. Thanks for watching. As we always, thank you for doing that. Have a great week, everyone. God bless.
Get more of Mike Broomhead on Facebook, Twitter, and of course weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 550 KFYI.